Beautiful. So good morning and welcome. Are we at day 5 now? Day 5 of New Year Nourish You. And today we are talking about restful sleep, which I actually had the best sleep I've had all week so far last night. So I'm feeling like nice and relaxed and very well rested, essentially. So very in theme with today's training. And yesterday we focused on nervous system and blissful relaxation. And these two topics are very linked because they impact each other. So the more we can regulate our nervous system, the better we'll find that we're sleeping, the deeper we're finding we're able to sleep at night. And we're able to get into that more consistent sleep schedule. We're less likely to have insomnia and things, and vice versa. The more we can have good sleep and restful sleep, the more we'll find our nervous system is supported because we're helping to regulate our nervous system through sleep. So very interlinked, these two. And if we're focusing on one, it can be great to focus on both, but even just by focusing on one or the other, it will be rippling into the other, which, as I've mentioned a couple of times, is also relevant for many of these habits. Like yesterday when we were speaking about how food is linked to our nervous system, and so is water and movement. Same with this, same with sleep. Sleep is going to support so many different areas of our health. It's the time where our body can really heal and rest and restore. And it's often an overlooked kind of element to health, right? Sleep can be one of those things where it's kind of like, oh yeah, I know I need to sleep, but I'm so busy. I've got all these things to do. Or we might be out late and we're like, oh, okay, I'll just have to miss out on a few hours sleep. And we start to accrue what I call sleep debt, where we're just not getting the amount of sleep that our body needs. And we're not getting that time for rest and restoration. And even when our goals, for example, any of our health goals, so whether it is to have more energy, of course, sleep's going to be impacted there. If it is to improve our mental health and support with things like anxiety or depression, sleep's going to be really beneficial for that. If it is something that's more like skin related or hormone related or reproductive, like any of this kind of stuff, sleep's going to support with all of that. But even if our goal is for weight release, and I prefer saying weight release rather than weight loss, because when we lose things, we look for them. So it's like releasing that weight, letting it go. And often when we're holding on to excess weight, it can be because we're holding on to other things. It's kind of like that energetic symbol of something else we're holding on to, or a protection strategy, or there's like many different things that can impact it. But if you've been wondering why I've been referring to it as weight release, that's kind of why. It's kind of like those being smart with our languaging, and not to say there's anything wrong with saying the words weight loss. That's fine too, and that's same. But I just can enjoy being really intentional with different languaging. So that's why I refer to it as that. So if weight release is one of your goals, then sleep is an amazing thing. Like we don't think of like, oh, I can lose weight in my sleep, but you actually can, or you can release weight in your sleep, I should say. It's actually going to support that too. So we think of like food and exercise, but what about these other things like nervous system and sleep? And I would say they're just as important as the food that we're eating and the way we're moving our body, especially when we go back to that concept of working out versus working in, and looking at like if our body's actually really stressed and we are working out heaps, it can actually have that negative impact towards our weight release goals. So sleep is just vital for so many things, and really want to encourage you, if you don't already love sleep, to start to love it and start to really gain the benefits from it. I personally notice if I go a night where I get like a less amount of sleep, or I'm not sleeping well, I'm waking through the night, or I get woken quite early, I feel the difference and it ripples into my other habits. So for example, on days where I would normally find it really easy to get up, brush my teeth, drink my water, head outside for a morning walk and get into my day, that will kind of throw off that routine, and it makes it a little bit more difficult to do the other healthy habits. So the more we can do any of these healthy habits, the more it feeds into supporting us in the other areas. And sleep is a big one for this. Sleep is one of the biggest ones I notice the difference. Whereas I can find if let's say I don't move my body for a day, then it's not necessarily going to impact the amount I hydrate or the way I'm eating or anything like that. Whereas if it's sleep, where I'm like getting limited sleep, I almost feel like hungover. And I know there are stats that kind of link like sleep deprivation being very similar to having a certain amount of alcohol in your system. So it's serious stuff here. When we're like sleep deprived, it really impacts our function as humans. So the more we can really prioritize sleep and support ourselves in getting more restful sleep, the better that it can be. So I have a few guidelines around sleep that I'll share with you. And the ideal amount, obviously, we're very individual, and I highly recommend testing out what your amount is. And you can do that by going to bed at a similar time every night and then not setting an alarm in the morning. So this is usually good for holidays. So it might not be the best thing to do at this time of year, but if you've got like even you can try it on a weekend and just test it with 2 days worth of data. And what you do is you go to sleep at a similar kind of time, and then you just don't set an alarm and see what time your body naturally wakes you up. And you can also try this by going to bed earlier, like way earlier before you would need to wake up for work, and then have your normal work alarm on, or your normal alarm for when you need to wake up for that day. And see when you wake up, because you'll see how many hours that was. You can calculate that many hours. You can be like, okay, this night I naturally woke up after 7.5 hours. This night I naturally woke up after 8 hours and 15 minutes. This night I naturally woke up after 7 hours and 40 minutes. And then you average them all out and you're like, okay, this is the amount that it seems my body is needing, or my body is kind of naturally gravitating towards, right? And it will regulate, especially when we're more on top of our sleep, and we've been getting between that 7 to 9 hours is that sweet spot as the general guideline, and then you can find your amount within that. But when we're getting more sleep and we feel like we're well rested in general, that can be a really good time to do this exercise too. Because sometimes what can happen is if we are quite sleep deprived, or sleep has been a bit of a pain point and it's an area that we struggle with a little bit and we're not getting the best sleep, we might need to repay that sleep debt, right? So there might be some nights where we do need closer to that 9 hours or even more. Like there's been times where I've even been like, I'm sure we can all relate, if we've been sick, you sleep like 12 hours or 14 hours and you're like, wow, this is a lot of sleep. And that's obviously the increased burden of the sickness and the body needing that extra rest. But yeah, sleep debt is a very real thing. So I would say very much like try and get that extra sleep. And if that means going to bed a little bit earlier, I promise you it feels so good. Like at the start, it's kind of like, oh, it's weird to be going to bed when everyone else is still just going out for drinks or things like that on a Saturday night. But you actually just kind of get used to it. And obviously there's exceptions to the rule. So obviously there's times where you're going to have something social on and you do stay out a bit later, and that's okay. What I just recommend in those cases is just allowing for that extra little bit of a sleep in the next day. And I see a kitty friend, so cute. Love the animals when they join us. So really just like getting into a groove and a rhythm with your sleep. And some of the ways to optimize our sleep are to have a good sleep routine. And as I mentioned, there's going to be times where we can't necessarily stick to that, and that's fine. These are guidelines. You don't have to, it's not hard and fast. It's not another thing for us to beat ourselves up over. It's like, oh, I like going to bed at 9, but I had a friend's party, it finished at 11, and now I'm such a horrible person. That's not where we want to go, right? We don't want to give our mind more fuel. We just want to see this as that guideline. It's like, okay, cool. I'm going to aim to go to bed at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock or whatever time feels good for you. I do recommend trying to get as much sleep before the midnight hours as possible. That can be a really good time for our melatonin secretion and for the deepest rest. So for example, like 9, 10 can be a really good time to go to sleep. And that's 9 or 10, not 9, 10, like 9 dot dot 10. You could go 9, 10 if you choose. Could be 9:15, could be 9:30. But I say like between 9 and 10 can be that sweet spot, especially depending what time you want to wake up in the morning. One really cool way to do this can also be like seasonal and going with like the sun. So obviously in summer, we've got daylight savings depending where we are tuning in from. So that might mean that little bit later, but then in winter, it's that little bit earlier. And then you're waking up like with the sunrise and things. So the sun and our circadian rhythm is actually a really good way to support in resetting this. So going with that natural rhythm and getting outside before bed as the sun's going down, getting outside in the morning as the sun's coming up. There's amazing benefits of this natural light exposure and of course being outside, which I've mentioned briefly as well. So we're getting that benefit, but we're also supporting that melatonin secretion, and melatonin is our sleep hormone, the sleep neurotransmitter that helps us get to sleep and stay asleep. So the more we can support the stimulation of our melatonin, the more we're going to be likely to fall asleep and then stay asleep through the night and then wake up when that sun starts coming up again. And then if we go outside, we're training our body alongside that circadian rhythm. And that can be really supportive. At different times in my life when I've been trying to like reset my sleep routine, I've used a very random but fun hack where I've slept in the backyard in a tent. Unfortunately, I'm in an apartment now, so it's not something I can do at the moment. But I remember, especially being in Melbourne through all the lockdowns, there were times where I was like, okay, well, I'm at home anyway, let's go camp in the backyard. And I used it as like a bit of like a sleep reset kind of thing, because you get so much tighter. And for anyone who's ever been camping, you know, you tend to go to sleep quite early. Like the sun goes down, you're like, yeah, I'm good, I'm done for the day. And then you wake up with the sun in the morning. So if you feel like you want like a hard reset of your sleep routine, have a little bit of fun with it. And if you've got a backyard, you can camp out in a swag or a tent, and utilize the cycles of nature to your advantage as well. So that's a bit of like a random thing. We'll come back to the normal guidelines. So as I mentioned previously, we've got the 7 to 9 hours is the ideal, and finding what's right for you. We also ideally want to be limiting our blue light exposure before bed. So for example, right now I've got my overhead lights on in this room. I've got a ring light on me. There's a lot of blue light here. Blue lights come in those artificial lights. So when it comes to time to wind down for the day, like in the morning, this is obviously fine because I don't need my melatonin to be secreting. I actually really don't want that to be going right now, because I don't want to be falling asleep and getting tired when I'm talking to you beautiful ladies here. So this is fine most of the day, the blue lights and things. But then when it comes to sleep time, I recommend a minimum of an hour before, trying to really limit that blue light exposure, so the artificial lights. Now, it also comes from things like laptops. So looking at a laptop right now, things like phones, there are different apps on these pieces of technology that we can install. For example, on the iPhone, it's like dark mode helps, but there's also another one. What's the other one called? You can essentially adjust like the warmth of your screen, so it goes a little bit more orange rather than that stark white. So you can have a play around in your settings for that as well. And on computers, there's an app called Flux. So I think it's I'm just gonna, yeah, F.lux. And this one you can set the times where it comes on and off. So for example, mine was still coming up really orange this morning, so I just like paused it and said, like, yeah, make it white, pause for an hour. But then at night, if I'm ever on my computer at night, which I do try and avoid before bed, but if there's times where it does happen, my screen is like incredibly orange, and I can choose how orange I want it, but it's really removing a lot of the blue light, and it's more of that red light that's there, which isn't going to interfere with the sleep as much as what the blue light is. So little tips around this. I've actually got red light globes, which I love. I love the vibe and the ambience of them. People joke all the time. It's like, oh, red light district in here. But it's actually really beautiful, and it's supportive for our melatonin. So if you want to get yourself any of those, I got them from Blue Blocks. I believe they've changed their name, and I can never remember what they've changed their name to, but I'm sure if you look up Blue Blocks red light globe, you'll be able to find it. And obviously these are bonuses. You don't need red light globes. You can even use things like salt lamps. They're naturally quite like reddy orange in their lighting, and they've got like a beautiful ambience as well. Or you can just, like, candles are awesome, but obviously a little bit more effort. Yeah, so you can just limit the amount of lights you're using. Even if you just have a normal lamp and maybe you're putting a thin piece of fabric over it at nighttime, or like when it gets closer to bed, that can be a nice thing to do to make it more subtle and gentle. So you've still got a form of light so you can see, but then it's like not impacting your sleep as much. So little hacks like that, like with our actual lighting. But then also when it comes to looking at technology, I actually recommend aiming to be off technology about an hour before bed and choosing a different activity to support with helping us unwind. So rather than those kind of go-tos, which can be like television or scrolling on our phones or those kinds of things, what if we start reading a book, if that's something we enjoy? What if we paint? What if we play with our animals, connect with anyone we live with, like whatever it may be, trying to incorporate like wind down activities that don't involve technology. It can even be things like a nice yoga flow and a stretch. And sometimes we do that guided, so sometimes that will involve a screen, but if you put on something like Flux and just try and make it as not bright as possible, that can be a beautiful thing to do. Or like the somatic exercises, so that one I linked you guys to in the Facebook group, give that a go before bed. just finding other things to do that actually really support with that nervous system regulation and helping us wind down, but are also going to be beneficial for our sleep and help us really feel like, okay, I'm getting tired now. So finding activities that don't involve technology before bed. And 1 hour is, like, I'd say, the recommendation. If you can do longer, amazing, but even just 1 hour is going to be really beneficial. And I know, yeah, these days we like are kind of wired to technology, so it can be difficult to do any more than that, but I find that 1 hour is a nice sweet spot. So I've mentioned the 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night is the guideline and the recommendations. We've mentioned the melatonin secretion and limiting the blue light exposure. So things like having more gentle lighting around the house and decreasing tech time. We've mentioned the routines. So trying to get into that rhythm and routine of going to bed at a similar time and then waking up at a similar time. So that one, our body loves routines. Our body is quite a habitual thing. So the more we can leverage that and the more we can be like, all right, this is the time I usually go to bed, you'll notice your body starts to get tired. And I notice those times in my life when I'm like traveling and I'm really out of routine and things, my tiredness is just out of whack. But then those times where I'm in a really good rhythm and I'm back in my routine at home, I find that like it'll get to a certain time of day and I won't even have to check the time. I'll know what the time is because I'm starting to feel tired and I'm starting to feel like, okay, it's time to like switch technology off and read a book or wind down or go for a walk outside and enjoy the sunset, whatever it is. Our body starts to tell us. And the more we can get it into that routine and we can get it into knowing when its bedtime is, the easier it's going to be to fall asleep. Because I know myself, I suffered from insomnia as a teenager and just could not get to sleep no matter what I tried. And it was not a nice time. So anyone else that's currently suffering with insomnia, these kinds of things can really support. And of course, like I mentioned earlier, other areas of our health and those other core healthy habits that we've been going through the past 4 days will also feed into sleep. That doesn't mean we have to nail all of them all at once. As I've mentioned a few times, it's all about finding areas where we can do with the most improvement or feel like it's going to give us the quickest win, the soonest, and focusing on that first. And this is the purpose of that wheel of health. And this is why I recommend every day we're going through and we're seeing, okay, where do I feel like I'm sitting right now? So today, when it comes to sleep, how do you feel like you're going with sleep? How many hours are you kind of currently getting? If you're not sure, this can be something you might want to like check in with for the next few days and track for the next few days. You don't need fancy equipment. You can literally just be like, okay, this is the time. Last time I looked at my phone when I went and got into bed, I checked the time. Or if you've got an alarm clock or anything, just check the time. You can jot it down or just remember it. I recommend jotting things down before bed so you're not giving yourself more things to think about or remember. So just jot down the time, and then when you wake up, just jotting that down that time as well. If you're waking up a lot during the night, you can kind of jot those down as well. Or if they're just really quick wake ups where you're barely even noticing, obviously don't wake yourself up just to write it. It's more if you're like experiencing some insomnia or restless sleep and you're waking up lots and you're awake for like big chunks of time, then you might want to like just kind of check in with those. So check in with where you currently are sleep-wise and how many hours you're getting, how you're feeling when you wake up. Are you feeling rested, or are you feeling like you just want to stay in bed for another few hours, or how are you kind of feeling? And even during the day, what's your energy like during the day? Are you feeling sustained energy-wise, or are you feeling like you're getting to about midday and you feel like you need a nap? Just checking in with this kind of stuff and then rating yourself based off that and being like, okay, where's my sleep currently? Yeah, I'm feeling like my sleep is actually quite good. I'm feeling really rested. That's going to go up on the higher end. Or yeah, I'm really not feeling rested. I'm finding it difficult to fall asleep at night. I'm waking up lots. I've got really inconsistent sleep schedule. I'm going to put that a little bit lower, and this can be an area to work on. So just assessing that. And I mentioned like tracking our sleep. For anyone who does have any of those kind of like smart technologies, like I've got an Aura ring, which is actually really cool. My boyfriend Ryan got it for me last Christmas. And this one is like specifically for sleep, but they've added more features. So now it even tracks my daytime stress, which is great now that I'm focusing so much on nervous system regulation, because I'm like, cool, how stressed was I? Where was my heart rate? What was I doing when I was stressed? What was I doing when it was telling me that I'm restoring and relaxed? So it's been really cool for that. But sleep-wise, this, for example, will tell me how much deep sleep I get, how much REM sleep I get, how much light sleep, how restless I was, how long it took me to fall asleep, all that kind of stuff. And again, we don't need tech like this. It's cool, it's fun if we have it as a bonus. Some watches do it, so certain smartwatches will do that. Again, we kind of want to even look at, this is probably like another topic, I'll briefly touch on it here. EMF exposure. So for example, this gives off a level of radiation. So I like to keep it in airplane mode. Same with those smartwatches. If you are wearing them to bed, I'd recommend, if there's an airplane mode, popping them in airplane mode just so that it's less radiation, so that our body can restore better. And this is where things like grounding can be really good, because obviously we're exposed to radiation whether or not we're wearing this smart tech. There's Wi-Fi all around us, there's radio waves, there's all these things. So just grounding in the ground more often can be really beneficial for supporting our body with holding the causes of the effects of radiation, essentially. So if you have any kind of trackers that you want to kind of use, amazing. If you don't, also great. Like you can do this all manually, like I mentioned before. I think I've got a chart somewhere where it's got some prompts to track our sleep, which I'll see if I can dig that up. But yeah, just like starting to familiarize yourself with that and starting to also notice what's impacting your sleep. So if you find you've watched a particular movie, like I spoke about, like action films yesterday and stressing out our nervous system, if you've watched one of those before bed and then you find you have like not so good sleep, just noticing that and being like, okay, that actually really impacted my sleep. Is there a way that if I choose to watch something like this, I watch it during the day instead? So there's a bit of that buffer and there's some wind down time to help your nervous system re-regulate and to help your body get into that rested state for sleep. So just starting to look at what impacts your sleep, even like what you ate in a day. It's like, oh, I actually slept really badly this day, and oh, I get it, I actually ate some tiramisu. I love tiramisu. I'm not a coffee drinker, but I love tiramisu as my Italian background. And when I eat tiramisu too close to bed, I am pinging. I'm just like so energized. There's been times where I've eaten it, like Christmas a few years ago, I ate it after dinner. This is before I put myself on like a don't eat it after dinner kind of guideline, because I know it doesn't impact me well. But I ate my tiramisu after dinner and I cleaned the entire house. I decided that Christmas was a great time to clean out my wardrobe and like fully take out my entire wardrobe and clean that out after everyone had left, and I'd cleaned after everyone left. So, I mean, if you want to be super productive, but I don't recommend doing that in the middle of the night. So just noticing what you've eaten throughout the day. And the same goes with beverages. Like obviously tiramisu has coffee, which is what was making me so hyper. So just noticing like, okay, I had coffee at 3 p.m. and that impacted my sleep and I couldn't get to sleep as well, or I woke up a lot or whatever it is. And my guidelines around coffee are aiming for before midday. Some people say before 2. I actually recommend a little bit earlier and say before midday is ideal. And in terms of guidelines for how much, I would recommend up to 2 cups of coffee per day. But more than that, we can be placing stress on our nervous system. And speaking of coffee in general, if you are feeling you've got quite a stressed and burdened nervous system, that can be something that can be really good to really reduce or eliminate temporarily. Not saying you have to give up coffee, but if you are working on nervous system regulation, coffee can be having a real impact on that. So noticing if you're having caffeinated things and how that impacts your sleep, and trying to have anything caffeinated before midday. And that goes for other things that have caffeine. So like the teas that aren't the herbal ones, so like green tea, white tea, black tea, they all have some level of caffeine. Even things like cacao. So I'm a huge fan of healthy hot chocolates. I make myself delicious hot chocolates all the time. But cacao does have some level of caffeine in there as well. So even with that, I notice I need to be cautious with when I have it. And different people have different sensitivities to caffeine. But even if you're someone who can drink coffee before bed and then go straight to sleep, like my Italian relatives, bless them, it can, like you might find you can get to sleep, but you won't necessarily be getting as restful sleep. So I'd be able to like track something like that by saying, oh, my deep sleep wasn't as much that night. But even if you don't have something that shows you that, you ultimately will be getting lighter sleep because that caffeine will be working in your body and you won't be able to get to that deep, deep sleep and that more restful state. So just considering all things like that. And one other thing that I will mention before we wrap up for today is the what I mentioned earlier about jotting things down before sleep. So I mentioned that in referral to when we're tracking like how much we're sleeping and like what time we're going to bed. But in general, if you have a busy mind, keep a notepad or a journal next to your bed. And before you go to bed, just write down the things that are on your mind. So you know it's there on that page. If there's anything you need to remember, you don't have to be ruminating on that thought. You're not going to have dreams of that thing because it's like, gotta remember, gotta remember, gotta remember, because that's going to place extra stress and burden on our nervous system and it can impact our sleep. So the more we can get these things out of our head and the more they can be on paper and we can just refer to that the next morning. If there's anything important there, perfect, we can action it. If it was all just random mumbo jumbo thoughts that our mind likes to take us on these crazy loops sometimes, then awesome, we can be like, cool, that's not important. That one's on the page, it can stay on the page. So having that notebook next to your bed or having that journal or utilizing a practice like journaling before bed can be really powerful to help to relax yourself. And that can be one of your tech-free things that you choose to do before bed. So that one's like a big game changer, I find, for lots of people, because it's very common to have that very overactive mind. So the more that we can work with that and be like, okay, cool, I hear you. Thanks for trying to help me remember all these things, but now is not the time. I'm not going to take my dry cleaning now at 10 p.m. Nothing's open. So let's write that down and let's put that on the list for tomorrow. So yeah, just like working with yourself here and really helping yourself remember things so that you don't have to constantly be remembering. And this is where I also love task management systems, where you can just like pop things in your task management system with due dates and it like reminds you and you can just track it all. So little hacks like that can be really supportive for sleep as well. So today's action step is going to be, actually I haven't thought of an action step today. I feel like it's just going to be around sleep and I'm going to make it that switching off technology an hour before bed. For some of us, you might already be doing this. Awesome. Keep going. You're nailing it. If you're not, if this feels really scary, it's like, oh gosh, that's a long time to not be on technology before bed. Let's lean in and let's try some of those relaxation exercises from yesterday before bed, whether it is, like I mentioned, something like journaling or going for a nice walk or painting or whatever. Try to do something that doesn't involve technology before bed and see how that impacts your ability to get to sleep and stay asleep. So that'll be your action task for today. Look forward to hearing how that like impacts you. If anyone has any questions, so we can open up the floor for questions. Bamboo pajamas are cool to sleep in. Yes, bamboo pajamas are so nice to sleep in, and bamboo bedding. Bamboo is really like breathable and yeah, it's a really nice kind of thing that will help keep you cool. Love that. Can have a pajama party. Awesome. Are there any other questions relating to sleep? How are we feeling about today's content? Got some good tips to help support and promote our sleep? Yeah. Beautiful. Awesome. Well, we'll leave it there for today, beautiful ladies. Enjoy your day. I hope you have a lovely, it's Friday today, isn't it? I lose track of the days so easily. Lovely Friday. I'll be seeing you tomorrow morning for our call. And then Sunday, remember, we'll be having that one off. Anyone who is in Melbourne, I did say that it's at Elwood for Feel Good Dips. It's actually going to be in Middle Park because the triathlon that's on in Elwood. So if anyone is in Melbourne and wants to come along, would love to see you. Those of you interstate, obviously not possible, unfortunately, but yeah, let's see what's going on here. See you all Monday. Beautiful. Have a lovely weekend and enjoy work, Narelle. And I'll see you on Monday. And those of you that can make it tomorrow, excited to see you. Those of you on the replay, big love to all of you too. But yeah, have a beautiful Friday, beautiful weekend, and I'll chat to you all soon. Bye for now.